So in the last video, if you haven't seen it, I was making the mounting here for the tank, and it works really well to support these two little rubbers so that I can put a mounting point in the center and lock it all down. Everything that I fabricate is always subject to change, and with this subframe ending right here, I wasn't really happy with the look. It just didn't really look clean to me. So I'm gonna remove the tank mount and make the subframe tie into the original frame perfectly. Let's break out the pipe bender and see what we can come up with. So I've got everything clamped onto the frame jig exactly where I want it. So now I'm just going to tack on this little brace here because I'm about to cut off the front one. And now for the fun part of notching this to the original frame. I want this to look like it was made for the bike, straight from the factory. So there's a few little tips here. The reference point at the top I know is going to stay where it is, so I can just line that off and then look down the line from the new frame to the old frame and see if you can see the point where it intersects. Wherever you see that, draw a line at the bottom, and then when it's level, draw a line at the top where you can see it intersect, and then just join those two together. And it should look something like this with a straight line going across. For me, I'm going to MIG weld it to keep in line with the rest of the bike so it all looks uniform, but if you're going to TIG weld it, you will probably need to make that gap as tight as possible. So I'm going to cut it about 5 mil under the line that I've actually drawn, just to give myself a bit of room to create the notch. Pretty good so far. It's on the up sweep, which is perfect because that means I just need to notch out the bottom a bit more, but this line is pretty damn good, so that worked out pretty well. I do have a gap here, but that's fine because once I bring it all down a little bit more, that should close that gap. A little bit of back and forth on the grinder and we have it pretty much dialed in. One thing that I did do was I made a mark between the two pieces so that each time I brought it back I knew it was just landing on the same spot, so I could keep making a mark where it was touching, go over to the grinder and make those adjustments. Happy with that. Now to do the other side. You can get notching tools for this, but if you just make your mark like I mentioned and then just add your 5 mil, if you're only doing a couple of them, you don't really need the notching tool. You can do this by hand and you can get it pretty damn close as long as you're patient. So I'm really happy with how that notching has turned out. It's 1,000 times better than what I originally had. If you're gonna do this, especially if you're gonna put a hoop on the back of your frame, there's a couple of things that you can do, or if not both of them, which I'll explain, and it makes it super strong. So if these are the two tubes that are joined together, the best way to prep it to make it super strong is to grind it angle on each end. So that when you put the two together and you fully weld it and then grind that flush, you've got all that meat of weld still sitting in there, which is never gonna break. And alternatively, or as well as, you can get a piece of dowel, whether it's solid or hollow, it doesn't really matter, and just put it in the center there, drill 2 holes here, one on each piece, and then just do a tack weld there and a tack weld there to hold that piece of dowel in there, and then fully weld it, and that's stronger again. And if you're a confident welder and you know what you're doing, if you do this method correctly, that pipe will bend long before that weld ever breaks. And I'm just using a bit of aluminium as a straight edge just to make sure that they're perfectly in line all the way around. And as you can see, there's going to be a new tank mount, which is going to be a plate going straight across the two, bracing those two joins even further. Now that that's done, let's remove the center support off the frame jig so that we can make the brace for the subframe. So after spending a bit of time getting these notches perfect on the bike, I stood back and looked at it and I realized that the proportions were just not quite what I expected or what I wanted. So I just decided I will restart, chop it down, and then remake these supports. But that was the first support I did and it didn't quite work out to plan. And that happens quite often. All I did here was shorten the subframe by 30 millimeters because I felt like the seat was just a little bit too long, and now the proportions of the seat compared to the tank work really well. And a little bit of back and forth again on the grinder just to get those supports notched in perfectly. I'm not going to fully weld this out yet. I'm going to do all of the fabrication work and just tack everything on and then go ahead and weld everything out all at once. And I also have an entire video showing how I made this monoshock swing arm setup. If you haven't seen that, definitely go and check that one out too. And now to make the seat base. Just remember, when you do make the seat base, you have to allow a little bit of room, especially up the front here where it sits on the tank, just for the material to go around, because otherwise your seat will sit up higher than what you want. And how I'm going to do that is just with 3 pieces of cardboard, the thickness that I think the material is going to be, and I'm just going to tape those together and then tape them onto the tank. There's so many different methods and materials you can use to make a seat base, whether it's fiberglass or aluminium or steel, even plywood. They all work, but this happens to be my favorite. This is actually thermoplastic, and all you need to do is heat up the area that you want to manipulate and then just bend it into shape and it'll form the thing that's under it. And you can heat it up as many times as you want just till you get it right. And then once it cools down, it stays like that permanently. And before we get started, if you're building yourself a motorcycle seat, check this stuff out. We have it on our website, as well as the foam, the high density foam, the same stuff I use on all of my motorcycles, and the seat clips to go with it. I think the best approach here is just going to tape it down to the tank. I like to make a bit of a base for the plastic to sit on, and this is just some scrap timber, and the idea of it is when you heat up the plastic, it could potentially droop in the middle, and this just gives it something firm to land on when it cools down. So I'm just going to start on this line here so that I can get that bending exactly where I want it. So I'm going to put a couple of pieces of heavy steel here, one's aluminium, one's steel, and that way I can direct the heat right on that line, and with that extra weight there, it should bring it down perfectly. As you can tell, it's closed the gap perfectly. It took me roughly about 30-40 seconds. Just look at how crisp you get that line when you do it that way. Now for the front. And what I recommend is getting something heavy like vice grips or these guys here, and just clamping them to each corner. And if you want to make the process even faster, get yourself a blowtorch like this. The blowtorch tends to burn the surface of the plastic, but it doesn't really matter because you can easily sand that off, and you're going to cover this in foam anyway. And to cool it down and set it so you don't have to hold it for a minute is just use some compressed air, which is what I do, or you can go and grab a frozen pack from your freezer. That'll also work. And to be totally honest with you, I think I do prefer the blowtorch method. It's a bit faster, and it also can spot heat one little area at a time rather than the whole piece. This really is the easiest way that I've found to make a seat base, and it's super strong and it's not messy like fiberglass, and you get that really nice smart looking transition where the seat meets the tank like it was built for the bike. And when it comes to clipping your seat down so it locks in place, these are the clips that I use. I find them fantastic. There's a male and a female, and how you use them is you just need a brace going straight across here, or even a tab welded on in 4 places. Drill 4 holes, 13 mil or 1/2 inch, and then pretty much put your seat base on. Mark where the holes are from the underside, drill those accordingly into the seat base, and then you put the males on the actual seat and the females in the base there, just like that, and you can fix them down with a couple of small screws or even rivets. I've actually got them installed on my CB750 seat, as you can see here. I've got 3, but 4 would probably be better. And they lock down and they're not going anywhere. So I'm undecided if I want to finish this section off here with a little metal infill panel like this, or just leave it completely open. Drop me a comment and let me know what you think will look best with or without the metal infill panel. And as always, I've got a ton of videos just like this one for you to go and check out. Here's one that I recommend you should watch next, and this is YouTube's recommendation.